And the guy's begging him, please don't kill me, I don't know anything, I don't know anything. And so at that point, hey guys, we're here in Guatemala. I'm gonna interview my friend, Jose Manuel. And I told you guys a little bit about his story, and the story of his family is just really crazy. Some crazy stuff has passed, you know, with those guys, and they're just some really hardworking, good people. They've grown their company and their business and their name, and it all started with his dad, born poor and you know, didn't even have enough money to have shoes. The true story of a third world country, and just with nothing, and grew into a multi-million-dollar organization, and just by, you know, a little by little. And I'll tell that story as well in other videos, but I'm here with his son right now, Jose Manuel Jr., and we're going to discuss basically his story, which he has a very crazy story of his own. So I'm going to proceed in an interview. I'll ask him a question, and he'll answer in Spanish, and then I'll translate it the best that I can in Spanish for you guys that in English for you guys that don't speak Spanish. So, Jose Manuel.
Más o menos alrededor de 100 manzanas de finca. ¿Vamos a traducir eso?
Sí. Okay, so basically he started off on his own as a young man, which his dad had kind of done his own thing, but really Jose Manuel didn't take a whole lot of help from his dad in any way, and the best he can remember as a young man, he was working with coffee, and in around 96 he got really lucky himself with in Brazil there was a problem with coffee, so the market went up real high, and up until that point for several years he had been just working in the dirt with his hands, and you know, without basic human necessities, without a change of clothes, without any good food, or you know, not even what we would consider clean drinkable water at times. So just really working and just every day toiling under the sun and growing coffee, and he hit that good market in around 1996, and was able to really grow his business from there. And you know, that he's just a prime example of hard work paying off. And like he said, 2 or 3 years it took him of toiling with nothing, and very, very difficult times like we don't understand. No power, no electricity, no running water, none of that stuff. So you know, years of that, and then you know, then he started to grow, and then really at that point a lot of guys will start to kind of lose out on they'll get some money and then they won't know what to do with it. So then the next phase of difficulty is kind of being smart with your investments and knowing what to do with that money, coming from not having money to having money. And so I guess we'll get into kind of the next crazy thing is I'll jump right into, since this is a story a lot of you guys have been wanting to hear, is he was actually kidnapped out of the mountains one day while he was working in the fields, and I'll let him tell a little bit of that story, whatever he's comfortable talking about. So, Jose Manuel.
Así avanzamos como unos 15 kilómetros. Y no sé si vas a traducir eso. Sí.
Okay. Okay, so basically, I asked him about the time that he was kidnapped, and he said it was, first off, he said it was just really a life-changing event, absolute life-changing event, and honestly, it ended up in a good way. It was one of the worst times of his life, but it ended up changing his perspective on life, for really just giving him an appreciation for his family and his life in general, and the blessings that God has given him. And really, it just turned out to be a blessing in disguise, like a lot of bad things in our lives can turn out to be. And he said he's come through much stronger of a person, and then he started telling the story basically. So we talked about how he worked, you know, he's working his way up, working in farming and growing things, and so he was up there every day. And one day he goes up to the mountain with one of his workers, and it was a Saturday, because you know, every Wednesday and Saturday, even as the company starts to grow, and even at this massive size that it is today, Saturday is payday. So he has to go up to the mountain. A lot of times we go up and we go through and we make pay. And you know, at this point in time, we have a ton of money with us if we're going to make payday, because we got to pay the people on, you know, however 20 different ranches that are growing the different products and things. So and it's pay for all of the employees. So he said, so he was going up and he, you know, he was going through an area that was really bad part of the road. So he pulls up to that bad part of the road and there's a branch blocking the road right there. And at that point, 4 guys come out, and one of them had an AK-47, one of them had a pistol, one of them had a shotgun, and they come out of the, you know, off the sides of the road where it was an ambush is what it was, and they came up and he didn't know what it was at first, what was going on. They put him in the back of the car. They eventually put a bag over his head. At that point, he knew he was being kidnapped. Then at that point, he was listening, trying to find out from the sounds of the car, and he knows these mountains and these roads from being on them his entire life so well that he was trying to figure out where they were going based on the sounds. But what he did understand was that the guy that was driving didn't know how to drive, probably had no experience driving a car. And he told the guy, look, you're gonna kill all of us. We're gonna fall off the side of this mountain. I mean, the road was just extremely bad, and the guy didn't know that he had to have the lockers, turn on the lockers and the 4-wheel drive. The guy was just spinning out in 2-wheel drive and just didn't know how to drive. The roads that we drive in these mountains are extremely difficult 4x4 off-road trails. And if you're not a good driver, you know, everybody will die. So he had to tell the guy that, and then they ended up going down the road a little ways, and that's kind of where we left off. The guy, un tiro por el carro, ¿verdad?
Sí.
As soon as he you know, let him know they were serious, the guy with the AK fired a shot into the back of the truck before he even got in. So he hit his worker. He said, I want to kill, what are we going to do with his worker? They were talking among themselves. They said, kill him. And Manuel begged for them to not kill his worker. And so they just hit him with the butt of the gun and he went tumbling down the mountain. And then now we're at the scene where they're kind of driving through the mountain, and en cuántos 1.5 kilómetros ustedes
avanzamos como unos 15 kilómetros en el carro.
15. Oh, so they went 15 kilometers in the car, and very bad driving, and then I'm gonna let him take over from there. Y ustedes cruzando en pie, ¿eh?
A pie, sí. Para abajo, para abajo.
Okay, so basically they went about 15 kilometers in the car, and they went all the way up to the this happened in Santa Barbara, Honduras, Santa Barbara, Honduras. And basically they went about 15 kilometers in the car, and then they went all the way up to the border of Guatemala and Honduras, where we just crossed earlier in this video, actually. And it was the illegal crossing that we didn't do today, but they crossed, and where they would have came back in if they would come back on the road, where I said that earlier in the video. So from there, he knows everybody in the mountain, because half the people work for him and the other half work with him. And at this point in 2003, he had grown his business from that 1996 coffee boom, if you will, to have a big business, and now everybody knew him. And he's driving his car, but he's not beeping at anybody, and he's not putting the window down, and everybody's seeing this car, and they're seeing his car, and they're thinking, man, that's weird. Why is Jose Manuel driving like a maniac and not responding or waving or beeping or, you know, giving any kind of the thing that we normally do? Like here in the country, in the States, we do the little, hey, how you doing thing. Well, none of that. It came to a point in the road where he saw his brother, and he was passing his brother, and he heard the guys say, that's his brother, and if his brother does anything, but just keep driving by. If his brother does anything, shoot his brother. And Manuel said it was a blessing from God that that his brother didn't do a joke, because normally when the brothers see each other in the mountain, they play chicken with the cars or, you know, do any kind of a game, but none of that happened, and he just kept going, flew by his brother. And they got to the border, and it was ¿cuánto en pie?
Empezamos a caminar a las 11 de la mañana. Y al lugar que me llevaron llegamos como a las 3:30 de la mañana.
See, from that point, they pulled the car over and crossed and did the whole border crossing on foot. 10 hours through, and this terrain, you've got to understand, is insanely difficult mountainous terrain, straight up and straight down through very heavy forest. And they did this all on foot. and with a bag over his head, he did this, and no food, no water for 3 days, which we'll get into that part. If I understand that correctly, we'll get into that part in a second. And he was just marched, okay, through this area, and it was 10 hours about 2,000 manzanas of territory. And they hid him in a cabin in Guatemala, and we're about to talk about what happened next.
Eso fue lo que hice, pues. Porque ellos al principio bien agresivos conmigo. Vamos a comprar el chip aquí.
Sí. Okay. All right, so we got to change cell phone chips real quick, but I'll catch up on basically what he said. He didn't at any time feel paranoid, out of control. Really, he never felt a lot of fear or anything like that. And it was really interesting because he was praying the whole time, and he at one point, or I'm sure at more than one point, asked God. He said, you know, God, these are small Guatemalan guys. I could probably take them. I could take one of the weapons from one of them and kill the other ones. I think I could do it. If that's what you want, give me a if you think if they're gonna try and kill me, give me a fear or a panic. Show me a sign. Let me see that these guys are planning to kill me, so I can make a move. And give me I'm keeping my eyes. He's basically talking to God. I'm gonna keep my eyes open for the best opportunity to take out one of these guys. And that God kind of gave him a peace, and that he knew he wasn't going to die. And they said, you know, hey, look, man, we know your dad has a bunch of money. We're going to ask him for 20 million lempiras, which is like at the time was like $1 million US dollars. And his dad didn't have that much money at the time. And you know, even if he did, it would have been in, you know, land and product and coffee and all that kind of stuff. So just, you know, the money that they have today and the size of their business today was nothing. It was nothing like that back then. But the next thing is he told a little bit more about his story and about how, well, the thing was, at the point that they were marching, you know, for 10 straight hours through this incredible terrain, several hours into it, the biggest thing in his mind was thirst, was water. He stopped thinking about the fact that he had a bag over his head. He stopped thinking about the fact that he had his arms and hands tied behind his back. All he could think about was the thirst for water. And they all got so hot and so dehydrated a few hours into this. None of the guys brought water. None of them were prepared. They just had their weapons, and that's it. That they all had masks on when they started. They all took their masks off. They took his mask off so he could drink water. And he saw all their faces, and at that point, that's when he started, you know, praying, am I gonna die? Should I make the move? And that's when he felt that peace and tranquility. But, you know, he said the funny thing was is they finally went to the very bottom of a mountain, found under some rocks, very, you know, up and down mountains. They went to the lowest point they could find and found some water, and they all drank water from under these rocks. And it's amazing how our natural survival instinct can just completely take over. And at that point, he knew he would die sooner not having water than these guys who were possibly going to kill him. So, but as soon as they drank their fill of water, then he went right back to thinking about the situation at hand. And then immediately, as soon as he got his water and as soon as he drank some water and was no longer thirsty, he was immediately, you know, back to the situation at hand. So, and then at that point they're marching through the mountain, and they eventually, one of the guys took the vehicle, and there was one guy, the guy that was driving that didn't know how to drive, was the brains of the operation. He's paying attention to all this stuff, so he can, you know, he's a very sharp guy, remembering everything that was going on, you know, planning for an escape, all this stuff. And the one guy drives the truck over to where it would look like that they never left Honduras. And then he was with the other two guys. There was only a total of 3 guys. Solo 3 de ellos, ¿verdad? 3. There's only a total of 3 guys. 1 guy with a pistol, 1 guy with a shotgun, 1 guy with an AK. The 4th guy, well, I misspoke earlier, was his employee. who had got, you know, hit in the face with the gun and rolled down the mountain. And I actually know that gentleman too. But so we'll pick up from there and we'll talk a little bit about what happened next.
Un faro de un barco que hay grande.
Okay, so he's walking in the mountain with these guys, and he's trying to do everything he can to ensure his survival. And this is some really intelligent and some tips for you guys that, you know, God forbid this ever happens to you, but he said the guys were not pros, and the way he could tell that is because he had his wallet in his back pocket and they tied his hands behind his back and they never took his wallet away from him. So these guys made all kinds of mistakes that ended up one of the reasons that he's still here and alive today. And you know, he was pulling out his wallet, and as he was walking, he noticed where he was at, and he had remembered he had been there 2 years before. And in areas where people walk, they would cross paths and things like that, that were footpaths for locals. He would throw some money from his wallet and his ID from his wallet in different parts in different areas, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. That's something that's very important and a very important thing to know, and as well as trying to be as aware of your surroundings and where you're at as possible if you do get that chance to escape, so you can immediately make it to an area where there's people. And he was noticing there's an area of lights from the ocean, and a town that was there from boats on the ocean in the distance, and there was a town he could see in the distance, and different things like that. Because you imagine now at this point they're walking through the mountain at night. So he left at 1 in the afternoon. From 10 hours, obviously it's now, you know, now it's hitting nighttime. Okay, dos en la noche en la montaña.
Se llama Champa.
Another thing I forgot to tell you guys was that he fell several times throughout this journey. They were just kind of pushing him through, and he hurt his knee pretty bad, and he fell several times and fell and rolled down the mountain, and they had to pick him up and keep him moving. They come up to a place where there was a house where there were dogs barking in the distance, and so they would have to like go back down and around and try and find long ways around. And then they came up on an area that was all cattle ranching and things of that nature. So there, you know, you can imagine 10 hours of hiking through the night, and you know, you're walking with guns, and an AK at that time was a mark of a vigilante or an illegal person in that area. So if anybody would have seen the guy with the AK, they would have known immediately something bad was happening. They probably would have had to kill the people that saw them, possibly, or it could have been, you know, any number of things. Definitely a Wild West type area that they were going through. You know, guys that take care of their property as well. The people don't want trespassers there, and you see somebody with an AK, you know it's bad news. So imagine that situation of 10 hours through the night, you know, him falling down the mountain. Once he finally gets to be able to drink, now he realizes how bad his knee is hurt, and he immediately realized that, you know, the predicament that he was in again. And the whole time, instead of really thinking of himself, the main thing he was worried about was his mother and how she was suffering. And his mother is an amazing lady. I know his mother well, and just an amazing woman. And yeah, I can imagine it would have been, you know, tough on any mother.
Bueno, entonces
Como a las 2 en la mañana.
yo creo que eran 2 o 3 de la mañana ya ahí.
Okay, so about 2 or 3 in the morning, he finally made it to a little corrugated tin shack. And he said one of the things that really struck him, you know, off guard, or took him off guard, really stood out to him, was that the guys, when they got him there, they were saying, "Thank God we made it here, thank God," like as if they were religious, and as if it was, you know, they were just delivering a package, and as if they had not just kidnapped someone. And the last leg of the journey, up until they got to this point where they're at the house, they were going through pasture, cow pasture, up until the last point. And this little shack was in the middle of a very large ranching property. And he was extremely worried because there's a yellow barba snake. I'm not sure what the exact translation in English is, but a very deadly poisonous snake in this area. There's tons of them in the mountain, and he was walking through knee-deep water for the last several hours, and he was very worried that he was going to get bitten by one of these snakes, and he didn't. And that was kind of the last thing on his mind. And then they got to this house, and the guys were there was a guy waiting there guarding the house, waiting to meet him, and he said, you know, why does he not have his face covered and all this? So they put the cover back on his head, but the entire time his arms had been tied behind his back. So now he'd been for over 10 hours with his arms tied behind his back, his knees busted, and he had nothing to eat up until this point, and had drinking some water from, you know, so underneath some rocks in the mountain. So okay, ahora. Okay, so basically this next part, man, I just can't even imagine being in a very emotional situation like this. Well, basically the leader ends up coming back the next day in the morning, and he's still tied up in this little shack that's the size of the cabin of this car. And the leader puts a flashlight in his face, and at this point he has not seen the leader's face, leader of the gang, but he could tell from the characteristics of this guy who he was, because he's a Honduran guy from the area that he's from, that Jose Manuel is from. They're from the same area, and this guy's famous for kidnapping people. He's a professional kidnapper, and the other guys that are with him are just some Guatemalan guys that he ends up using. So the guy comes in and basically tells him, look, we want $1 million from your dad. What we're going to do is we're going to cut off one finger and send it to him. I'm going to give you a piece of paper, and you need to write 3 things on this piece of paper that only you and your family knows, and that's going to be the proof of life. After the proof of life, we're going to start cutting fingers and sending fingers until we get the money. And Jose Manuel told the guy, look, my life is in your hands, but my life is in God's hands, and it's up to God. It's not up to you whether you want to take my life. And he started to cry, and the guy left. And one of the other guys told Jose Manuel, look, this guy's a bad man. He's here raping women all over the place, and this is what he does, and he could care less to kill you and cut off your fingers, and it doesn't matter. We're not like that. We're not going to kill you, so help us out, get, you know, some money or whatever. And so that's kind of how the situation's going up to this point. And I guess the guy left to try and make contact with the family of Jose Manuel, with his father.
Ahí, ahí cuando estaba en la mera montaña, lo que sí me hizo pija fueron los zancudos, unos zancudos así, pero todo el cuerpo, todo okay, esto,
So up to this point, the next night had come, and he still hadn't eaten anything. He didn't eat the entire 3 days, but the guys were starting to mess with him about not eating, so he kind of took the food and knocked it off the plate. His hands were still tied behind his back the entire time, but he kind of like pushed the food into a little hole so they would think he was eating, and he wasn't eating, and he said he just wasn't hungry the whole time, and it didn't feel like eating. And so that night passed, and the next day, and he heard some horses come up to the little shack that he was in, and he was still blindfolded and hands tied behind his back. And at this point they put him on a horse, still blindfolded, and he's trying to feel the horse, and he said he was on the back of the horse because he could feel his tail. And so they put him on the horse, and they took him to a cave even deeper into the mountains, and they put him in a cave now. And so now he's just way in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Guatemala in a cave. And it's day 3, and these guys, night and day, the 2 that were with him are now the same 2 Guatemalan guys that took him through the mountain to begin with. The driver and leader has been coming and going, and he's basically with these guys, and these guys are just smoking marijuana day in and day out, and that's all they're doing is just kind of smoking marijuana and hanging out and watching him. And basically, now that he was in the mountain, these giant mosquitoes were just eating him alive while he was in the cave. And so he's in this cave in the middle of the mountains now. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. He's been, you know, been marched through the woods, probably hasn't gone to the bathroom, any of that stuff, hands tied behind his back, blindfolded, and now he's getting eaten alive by mosquitoes in the middle of nowhere in Guatemala. ¿Y ahora? Excellent. Okay, so now at this point he's in this cave being eaten alive by mosquitoes, and these guys are out front. 2 more guys show up with shotguns. There's an AK, a pistol, now 2 more shotguns, and these 2 young guys showed up. Well, he said the other 2 were older, these 2 are younger, and they're out smoking pot and playing video games and things of that nature outside the cave. And he hasn't slept now in almost 3 days, hasn't eaten, just only drank water in almost 3 days. He's in this, basically a hole in a cave, and he's thinking the whole time, not sleeping. He's thinking about, going through his mind and thinking about every street in his hometown and every avenue and everybody that he knows and everybody that he could have passed and thought, you know, he's just all of these people in his life are going through his mind. And at this time, of course he doesn't know it right now, but at this time his father is going through the mountain. And his father, I know his father very well as well, and his father's a very just like he is. When he gets set on something, he does it. You know, actually all of us are kind of the same way in that. When we decide to set out to do something, we do it. And his father has set out now and is with, ¿cuántas personas es en el grupo? 50.
De los disparos, no, ellos solo eran, creo que eran 20 personas.
His father had set out with 20 Special Forces anti-kidnapping squad from Honduras. And this is only 5 months has there been this brand new squadron of guys. They took some elite Special Forces guys, sent them to Colombia for training, and only 5 months has it been around. And his father, being one of the most influential people in the area, you know, obviously was able to call and get this squadron of guys, and they're just pounding the mountain, searching on foot, going through and searching for him. And ¿cuántas personas también de 3,000?
Oh, de personas era todo el pueblo, creo.
There was about 3,000 people that set out on foot looking for him. His dad was specifically with these 20 Special Forces guys, but they were actually getting close to where he was at, following the breadcrumb clues that he had left. But everybody else was just searching all of the mountains of Honduras, obviously not very close because now he's in Guatemala. But his father was hiking on foot, following the breadcrumbs, and closing in pretty close on day 2, closing in pretty close with these Special Forces guys.
Entonces,
okay, so basically at this time in Honduras, really bad time, lots of kidnapping. So the president Maduro, his son, brand new president, but his son had been kidnapped. They killed his son and he lost his money. So he was a big time businessman before he became president, and his son was kidnapped and killed, and he lost the money that he paid for his son. So when he became president, he just went really above and beyond, taking out gang people and kidnappers and all kinds of stuff like that. So it was a good time. It's also why that anti-kidnapping unit just got started. So it was a time of change in Honduras. It wasn't a time yet where it was the height of the worst time of kidnapping at this time in 2003, around then. And it went down from there, but it was probably the most dangerous time of modern Honduras in these days. And so also in this time, it was not a time of modern era of cell phones. So these guys were having a big problem with communication, with getting a hold of anybody from his family to ask their demands or anything like that. His dad was working 2 hours drive through the mountain in one area, his brother in another, but word started really circulating. The worker, as soon as the worker, you know, got hit in the face, rolled down the mountain. As soon as he saw the car drive off, he ran, encountered somebody on the road, went to his dad's house, and they started spreading the word about him being kidnapped. So like I said, it ended up being, by day 2, there was 3,000 people looking. By the end of day 1, there was 3,000 people in the mountains set out on foot looking for Jose Manuel. And here's Manuel in this cave, and these other guys that come up, and they're talking among themselves. What are we gonna do? Where is, you know, this guy that was supposed to be coming with a pen and paper to write down these, somebody that can write with a pen and paper to write down these secrets about his life, his proof of life. things that only he knows. So they're like, well, man, what are we gonna do? Well, we're out of control here. We're out of our league. We're gonna hire a more professional kidnapper, the best in Guatemala. So we're gonna get this guy from Guatemala, and we're gonna move Jose Manuel to the city. And they're talking among themselves that they're gonna move him again, which would have been very bad for him, but it didn't get that far. Now let's find out what happened next. ¿En qué manera ellos encuentran?
Bueno, ok, entonces vienen ahí.
Okay, so basically now his father is with the head of this Special Forces anti-kidnapping unit that has just been found, and he's from this really small town, and it's a God thing, funny thing, whatever you want to call it, fate, that his father happened to be from this really poor neighborhood in Santa Barbara where they were born, and there's some guy that's now grew up with his father that's in the government. So they both grew up very poor together. They really didn't maintain contact, but they got in touch somehow, and it was like 1 in the morning when he got kidnapped, and by 2 in the afternoon his father had contact and was out searching the mountain with these guys. So roughly 13 hours later, somewhere in there, his father was searching. So his father, looked at a map, and his father knows all these mountains. He basically, now he has property on this entire area, both sides of the border, and just incredible amount. But he knew all of it because he just started from nothing and built all of it into his own little empire. And he sat down and he thought, and he looked at the map in his mind, and he said, okay, my son has to be here. If they were going to be doing any walking through the woods, if they kidnapped him here, the only logical place to go would be here. And nobody really knows how his dad knew this, but his dad knew and figured it out. And so he told those guys, look, we have to start here. They ended up hearing, hey, somebody came forward and said, I saw some strange Guatemalan guys on my property. And then so the head of the anti-kidnapping police went and basically grabbed this guy who had been known to have been involved with kidnappings in the area, and the guy was part of this church and had his Bible with him when they grabbed him, and Don Lito, his dad, knew who this guy was, and he thought, no, there's no way this guy's involved. I know this guy, I know his family, there's no way he's involved. And he's a member of the church, he's got his Bible with him. And so they grabbed this guy, and all of these people come with machetes and stuff that know Jose Manuel because they're mad and they want to hurt somebody. So they took him, and they took him somewhere private, just Jose Manuel's dad, Don Lito, and this head of this anti-kidnapping police. And the head of the anti-kidnapping starts to beat the guy and torture him to get information, which is normal here. And he's torturing this guy to get information, and Don Lito, Manuel's dad, Don Lito says, please don't beat this guy. I know this guy, I know his family, he probably doesn't know anything. And the head of the police got mad at Manuel's dad, Don Lito, and said, you need to be quiet. This is my job, I know what I'm doing. And they got in a little bit of an argument, but Don Lito ended up saying, look, if you're gonna beat him up, I don't want problems in the future of my life. Another thing where the way things go here is if you beat somebody up, then they're gonna send somebody to kill you for 20 bucks, or somebody's gonna come kill you, or it's gonna create a rivalry between families. We were just in the mountain a couple weeks ago where there was a guy who had killed like 40 some people from a neighboring family. It started out just like that, one guy beat somebody up, the other guy killed somebody from that family, then they killed somebody, and then it went back and forth until one guy wiped out the entire other family. So that's how it works. And Don Lito said, just if you're gonna beat him up, you're gonna have to kill him, because I don't want to have these kind of problems with people that I know. And the guy who said, just let me do my job, and he's beating him. He said, look, I don't know anything, but my cousin knows everything. Okay, so now we got information. Now we know somebody who knows somebody who knows exactly what's going on and where Jose Manuel is. So that's the link they found. Y él dice, mi sobrino sabe todo. Bueno, so at this point they found out this guy's saying that his cousin knows what's going on. So now a vigilante group has formed. There's 3,000 people from the mountain with, you know, all of these guys that work for Don Lito and know Don Lito and are friends with the family, and these great hardworking people now that have been kidnapped, and everybody's mad and stirring, and they're grabbing every kind of weapon they can grab. And everybody in this area at this time, AKs, 47s are illegal, so they're all, you know, stashed in the house and under the ground, and everybody's digging up and pulling out their AK-47s and going out on the streets and shooting up people's houses from this guy's family. And just, I mean, it's getting crazy. There's 3,000 people just destroying houses and breaking windows of cars and looking for this one guy that supposedly knows where Jose Manuel is. So they get there and they find the guy, and they get to the house, and Don Lito gets to the house, and the anti-kidnapping police pull a couple of these guys out of this house, all these family guys together, and they put them facing opposite directions, arrest them, tie them up. They've all been beaten up a little bit, and the cop pulls his gun out and says really loud, "If you don't tell me anything right now, I'm just gonna kill you. I'm tired of messing around." Boom, boom. And he goes to the other guy, and the other guy immediately starts to say, okay, don't kill me, I know where he is, because he thought that they didn't kill the guy, but it was a police trick to get the information out of the guy. So they got the information, and now they set out on foot. They've got all the police captain right now, the head of the unit of anti-kidnapping, is really worried that all these people are going to ruin everything because there's so many vigilantes. So Don Lito talks to the guys and says, look, we're just going to take these 20 guys that are trained specifically for anti-kidnapping and Don Lito, and they set out on foot for where they knew this location was, and they're going in, you know, a military unit going in, all of them with their firearms and obviously kit and everything, and all kinds of different MREs, and they've had that this whole time, so they're super prepared. Energy levels are good, morale is high. They just found out where this guy is. They finally got the mission going, and they go in, and on the way up, they stop this kid with some food, an 8-year-old kid, and it happened to be the kid that had been bringing Jose Manuel the food every day that he was not eating. And they said, you know, to the kid, what's going on? Who's this food for? You know, the captain was talking to the kid, and he said, oh, it's some guy that they've got in this house up there. The food's for him. I don't know. My mom's over here making food, and my dad's up at the house. And so they sent 10 guys to capture the mom, and 10 guys to go up and capture Jose Manuel where he was at, and that's kind of where we left off with that. So basically the police had got to the location where he was at. They were fairly sure they knew where he was. The people that were in the house with the woman was cooking food. He was in the cave up in the mountain. They beat the woman a little bit on the butt, spanked her to try and get her to talk, and then they threatened to cut off her fingers, and she finally said, look, they're here, don't kill my husband's with them. One guy came up, rescued him basically. The two guys, while he was in there laying in the cave, the two guys out front, he heard them cock their weapons and charge the weapons and basically run off immediately. And then somebody pulled his blindfold off. It was the police officer took his vest off and put it on him, and basically, you know, kept him covered until he was sure that the area was clear. Very professional. And then they went from there to basically the full rescue happened. He gave his dad a big hug. You know, he was saved from there on out. They transported him. The police officer told him, look, if we either have to chase these guys down and kill them because it's Guatemala and we're Honduran police, we're not supposed to be here, military, and or we should just go back. And Jose Manuel and Don Lito said, let's just go back. It's better to go back, not worry about it. So they went back, and when they got they found a phone, called back, told his mom they were okay, got back to a point where they were at the river, and basically this big river crossing, and he said there was just thousands of people there. The whole town, his whole hometown, was closed down for a big party, and just really the help that he felt through those people, and the love and everything was just unbelievable. And there's newspaper pictures you guys can check out on my Instagram. I've got the picture up on my Instagram feed of the newspaper cover of when he was saved, and when he first gave his mom a hug, and just a beautiful thing and a beautiful picture. And okay, y ahora. So in closing for this story, what the final day, Manuel was in his house and just had, you know, everybody there and thanking God, and it became a religious and a party and a great thing and a real thing that we've discussed and have talked about together in both of our lives. We've had just such crazy things happen that supposedly that man cannot fix, things that you can't recover from, things that there's no way to continue in your life. People will and have told both of us, you cannot recover from this. You cannot continue. You cannot have a good life anymore. Your life is over as you know it, but we're both here and we're together and we're friends and we're doing, you know, continuing to do great things and you know, onwards and upwards, and really just as a show of the power of God and what faith, you know, faith, un poquito de fe puede hacer, porque the faith, a little bit of faith in God and just trust, and can get you through situations like that. And basically, you know, that's what Jose Manuel wants you to take from this, is that don't let anything like that weigh you down. Don't let it destroy your life. Find a way to continue. He spent maybe 2 days living with fear. The first night home, he couldn't sleep. But he went right back to the mountains, and he doesn't have any kind of problems. He didn't allow it to keep him from doing it. He still does the same thing in the mountains, and the closest thing that he has to a bodyguard is me, and and he's never traveled with anyone else. He doesn't, you know, that could be considered a bodyguard. He doesn't have a gun. He never went and got a gun, and he's not anti-gun. He has, you know, he owns firearms, but you know, carrying a gun for the purpose of protection every day, he doesn't do it. Not that he's against it, or he just feels like he doesn't need one, and you know, he's kind of more of a person where he's, you know, he puts his faith in God, and you know, he has a gun if he needs one, and like a lot of us do, but he doesn't carry it regularly because he puts his faith in God, and I really like that quality about him. He's one of my best friends, and you know, I'm a big proponent, and I've said this a lot in my mentoring and blogging and as a coach, and for the, you know, mentoring youths, and I say all the time, you become the 5 people you surround yourself with, and I'm proud to call him a friend, and I'm proud to call him one of the people that's one of the 5 people that I surround myself with the most in my life. So guys, questions, comments below. If you want to see more of Jose Manuel, let me know. Y con eso, Manuel Frío y Bone out.